Welcome back to WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Box Hill Pizzeria. The best crab cakes in Norfolk County can now be shipped anywhere in the world. You can learn more at boxhillpizzeria.com. They're also expanding the dining room up there in Abingdon and building it bigger and better. I'm looking forward. If you see Tommy or Chris, tell them Nestor gives them a shout-out here from Box Hill Pizzeria and WNST.net. They make some pizza out there in Detroit. The guy that owned the team made a lot of pizza, and they lost him recently, and the change of ownership there has created a little bit of a different organization there. And the Orioles, of course, spending their midweek freezing in Detroit as opposed to freezing in Baltimore or freezing in Boston. This guy has been freezing as well because he's been chasing the Tigers around. They haven't played a lot of baseball over the weekend, getting washed out, snowed out, snained out, and all that stuff. He is the longtime beat writer for the Detroit Tigers at MLB.com. He's also a marathoner, which I always have great respect for, as well as a pretty big sports fan if you follow him out on Twitter. And tens of thousands do at Beck Jason, sort of like the artist Beck. He goes Beck first, Jason second. We welcome Jason Beck, one of our defending champions, back on from the Motor City where they're going to play a little baseball this week. And, dude, first things first, and I'll get to the marathon and all that, but, man, the weather has been a factor for the Orioles, and they've played through a lot of this stuff. They didn't play through the marathon on Monday, and I know you're a marathoner, and I saw these people running around in 35 degrees, and I guess it's probably better marathon weather than baseball weather. But baseball, the story has been low crowds, starting the season early, this kid in Anaheim. But really, the lack of getting these games in and what it's going to mean to these teams moving forward. And nobody's been more impacted than the Tigers, right, Chase?
Well, you can argue the Twins because the Twins have played a couple fewer games. But in terms of weather, just consistently following them around, the Tigers have had it as bad as anybody. They opened at home, which on March 29th, that got postponed due to weather.
That's a great idea, by the way. Let's open in March in Detroit. I mean, what are they thinking?
Well, to some degree, I get some of the scheduling that you can't have everybody, going to warm weather places at the same time at the start of the year. The challenge the Tigers have faced is that they've had a lot of visits from teams that only come into town once. So they've had pressure to try to make it up before teams leave town. So they ended up having a day-night doubleheader against the Pirates on the first Sunday of the season. In cold weather, it was playable, and it was dry, but it was cold. And then they ended up having a game postponed due to cold weather and I think a little bit of snow against KC. They're going to make that up on Friday because KC, for some reason, comes into town twice in April and then doesn't come back until September. And then they had, as I think a lot of people know, they had back-to-back postponements against the Yankees over the weekend due to just brutal weather with this winter storm that came through. And they were under pressure to try to get at least one game in to try to make the makeup date in June a little bit less daunting, but there was no chance. It was dangerous weather just to travel and let alone try to play baseball.
Well, it's an awful situation for everybody. The people that sit out rain delays and wait it out, and the weather's bad, and the pitchers and the managers and the teams and the airplanes and the broadcasters and, all of that. It is really, really unfortunate, that becomes such a storyline for teams, and it's completely unavoidable and completely unpredictable, and then everybody has to adjust to it. Certainly these teams already, the Orioles and the Tigers, have challenges coming into this campaign, right? And in Boston they can complain about the weather, but you're not complaining about the weather when you're 14-2 or whatever, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. When you're going through that. Although, credit to Joe Madden the other day, his team comes back and wins I think it was a 14-10 game against the Braves, and he admitted that those conditions, were not good for baseball at all and that they probably shouldn't have played.
Well, I think we could say that in a lot of occasions. Other than the team not playing for half a week and the pitching being turned upside down and everything and sitting around and waiting, at least as Jim Palmer said on Sunday, they banged the game early for Monday on the marathon day. But clearly it's not going well for the Tigers here in the early going, and the sputtering and the starting and the stopping and the bad weather, not good for them. And, quite frankly, I don't know what the upside of the campaign was this year. Give me a little optimism. Sell me some optimism on the 18 Tigers, Jason Beck.
Well, the upside was going to be the development of the young players and trying to see, if maybe the pitching comes around. And yeah, it's, the stopping and starting has really had an impact. Even when they've played, they very rarely had a chance to hit outside for batting practice. And I think it reflects in the numbers you see offensively for these guys. That other than Leonis Martin up at the top of the order, they really aren't very good numbers. Miguel Cabrera had a pretty good start going, and then the last road trip really, sunk him like a rock. He's trying to get back going, trying to figure out what's going on with his swing. And it's not easy to do when you have to spend most of your day sitting in the cage and then hoping that you get some at-bats in like 35-degree weather.
Pitching-wise and getting a rotation together, clearly that's been an issue around here. We thought we had that sorted out with Cobb. Well, that is to be determined as, Castro turned it around a little bit, and certainly Bundy looks incredible. But the bottom of the rotation, it's not just the Orioles that have that problem, right? Like figuring out who's going to pitch on the fourth or fifth day, let alone getting what you need to get on the second and third day after, you do get a decent start from Liriano or Boyd, right?
Yeah, it's the pitching has been the bright side. The pitching has looked surprisingly good so far this year. The question, I think, for a lot of people has been how much of that comes down to the pitchers themselves and how much of that is affected by the weather, being able to bust some guys inside, with some pitches or even challenge some guys over the plate, knowing that, in chilly, windy conditions, that ball, unless the wind's blowing out, is not going to travel. They have not suffered a whole lot of wind-aided home runs here so far this season. But Matthew Boyd has looked good. Michael Fulmer looks back. And they're starting to get a semblance of a bullpen come together here in the late innings with Joe Jimenez emerging as a setup guy behind Shane Green.
You mentioned Fulmer. I mean, he's a bit of a wild card in the way that maybe Gausman is around here where, getting something out of him would change the season in Detroit, right?
Yeah, I think if you can get him back to where he looks like a legit ace, that gives you somebody that people, when you get a good stretch of games going where you can get that rotation turning over every 5 games, it gives people somebody to look forward to on the mound. Maybe not in the same sense as Verlander, but still somebody who's like, okay, this guy's going to pitch a good game. The Tigers have a chance to win this one. So, let's come out and let's check this guy out.
Obviously there's been a change in the ownership here or philosophically going from Peter Angelos to John and Lou Angelos. In Detroit, obviously things changed there, and for a lot of years they were an outlier in spending money. The owner really wanted to win. The owner really it was a life quest for him. It wasn't just a business and a bean counting situation for him, he had a lot of beans to count, and I think all he really wanted to do was win, which made me want to put a Tom Selleck hat on from time to time because I sort of love that old world approach, but the modern approach has been a little different here, right? Like everyone speaks to the Astros and maybe what the Royals did a few years ago to say we're going to preach fiscal constraints. Some call it collusion in the offseason, Jason. I'm sure you're aware of that, but at least in Detroit, this rebuilding thing appears to be something that would be different than what the other ownership would have done or the way it might have been handled in the past.
Yeah, Chris Ilitch, Mike's son, is now handling a lot of the day-to-day ownership duties, and he's more of a businessman, and he's also more of a analytical numbers type of thinker, and I think what you're looking at from the Tigers reflects that right now, is that they've torn it down, they're rebuilding. You're not completely through the teardown yet. There's still some pieces they could trade, but they're trying to stockpile prospects while also doing a lot of modernization with their front office and their scouting. While the Tigers spent tons of money under Mike Ilitch, they did not follow the trend of analytics and player development, and they're playing a lot of catch-up in those areas. And they're really spending a lot of money trying to expand those. They've hired a bunch of analysts over the last couple of years, while also expanding their scouting staff a lot, so they can do deep dives into other teams' minor league systems to figure out where the potential underrated prospects are when they come around to doing more trades. So it's interesting to watch. They have the top pick in the draft this June. So you're going to hear a lot more focus on player development with these guys in the coming weeks. And it's going to be interesting to watch because we haven't seen the Tigers underdo this type of project in decades. Even when they lost 119 in 2003, yeah, there was a focus on player development, but ultimately there was a ton of free agent spending that helped get them back to the top in a few years. This one looks like a little bit more of a long play.
Jason Beck is the Detroit Tigers beat writer for MLB.com, covering the Tigers for a number of years there. You can follow him out on Twitter as well at Beck Jason. And, I guess, Jason, for the Tigers in saying, well, the rebuilding thing is there and say, that's the industry, right? I mean, every room Illich goes into where the think tanks come together, this is how it's being done everywhere across the board. The Orioles don't operate that way, obviously, but there really is a pattern for all of this, is saving money, going younger. But there's also this thing where the Tigers are, where they strike out as much as the Orioles do, right? They're a station-to-station team to some degree. We're not stealing bases in baseball anymore, sacrificing guys over, or quite frankly, playing the kind of defense that we used to play. It really is about the long ball and the strikeout to some degree, right?
I see the Tigers are a little different this year. They're a much more aggressive base running team under Ron Gardenhire. He's stressed being able to press the issue and look for the extra base. There's some guys it's just not going to happen with. Victor Martinez isn't going to go first to third very often unless something crazy happens. Maybe on a double, but and Miguel Cabrera is kind of a little bit more stationary as well, although he looks to be more aggressive. But with Leonis Martinez at the top, and Jeimer Candelario, Dixon Machado and Jose Iglesias at the bottom, even James McCann and Jacoby Jones, they're looking to press the issue more. They're looking to create more offense on the base paths. So it's a little bit of a change of pace with these guys. You haven't really seen it to this extent in years, probably since the middle of last decade.
Man, Victor Martinez, timeless, ageless, right? It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, this is, he doesn't say outright it's his last year yet, but he keeps dropping hints at 39, knowing the way the industry is headed, that this is probably going to be it for him. He wants to go out on a high note. He already has plans as far as what he wants to do in retirement. He's got a nice cattle ranch in the middle of Florida. He wants to go there. He wants to focus on livestock, as crazy as it sounds, and kind of doing that and watching his kid, who's a crazy good switch hitter, grow up and become a pretty good player in his own right.
Jason Beck covering all things Detroit Tigers. It's all brought to you by our friends at Pizza John's. My mom's favorite pizza, my wife's favorite pizza. Get down to back River Neck Road and go see why they've been doing it for 50 years down there. Also brought to you by Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast, the tasty coffee, the best fried chicken anywhere. Make sure you're using the Rofo app when you're gassing up. You'll get some free Western fries, some chicken, and some of that tasty Kona blend coffee. Also, we are partners with the Model Lyric. Want to remind everybody about the big Pink Floyd show next week called Brit Floyd. We had Damian Darlington on the program. You can find that in the buyatoyota.com audio vault, talking about our mutual love of the music of Pink Floyd. So if you're skipping out on draft night, come on down to the Model Lyric and take in the music of Pink Floyd and sign up for our WNST text service. We'll let you know who the Ravens pick at 16. Jason Beck is our guest here. And you mentioned the draft and having the number one pick. Boy, the baseball draft's different, right? We're up on the week of the football draft, and all eyes, I'm sure, where you are on the Lions, as well as the Browns in Cleveland, because they have the number one pick, everything around here. The baseball draft's different, but in an organization where you have the number one pick, I bet the fans buzz up a little bit more here in your marketplace over the next 8 weeks than they probably usually do, right?
Oh, yeah. I do like a inbox feature where I take questions every week or so. And usually without fail, there's a few questions coming in saying like, hey, who's it look like the Tigers are going to take, with the number one pick? Is there a clear-cut guy emerging? Is there that elite hitter that these guys need? And, the anticipation really is, I don't think I've seen it like this since the year that they picked Verlander. And they had the second overall pick that year. And Verlander was really kind of this underrated, kind of underpublicized, hard-throwing kid out of Old Dominion that year. And it looks like, unless something crazy happens over the next 5 or 6 weeks, they'll probably go the pitching route again just because that's the way the draft shakes out. There's some pretty good arms out there. They already have a pretty good crop of starting pitching prospects on the way. This is going to bolster it, and I think what you're going to see is in the next year or two, you're going to start hearing about this, ballyhooed next Tigers rotation along the lines of Verlander, Scherzer, and Porcello that could be on the way up. At least that's what they're going to hope, and that really, realistically, is what the rebuilding project is going to hinge on.
Anything you would say about Verlander and watching from far what happened to him after watching it on the inside and probably often wondering whether he was going to get dealt off somewhere at some point when the thing sort of fell apart a couple of years ago? There's a guy there that's done a lot of things in the public eye, obviously has a relationship in the public circle as well, but certainly went down there to Houston and changed the narrative of the rest of his career, right?
Yeah, I think it worked out well for both sides. I mean, time will tell whether the Tigers make a whole lot of the prospect package they received in return. Franklin Perez, who was a top-ranked pitching prospect they got in return, he's on the mend right now. He had an oblique injury in spring training. They're hoping to get him back in June sometime, maybe July. They got a really good catching prospect named Jake Rogers, who has a chance to be that next pitch caller for them to kind of go along with the pitching they have coming up. And they have Daz Cameron, who is the son of Mike Cameron and could be the elite center fielder, or at least they hope has a chance to be that elite center fielder they can plug into their defense here in a few years. But and I think it worked out for Verlander as well in that he got to listen to a new set of voices talking with him. He's embraced analytics in a way he was never willing to do in Detroit. And he has a chance to pitch for a contender and being able to spend, his remaining prime years pitching in big games. And I think it, as difficult as it was to see him go at the end of August last year, I think it was something that really worked out well for both sides so far.
Always appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on, giving us a little preview here. My preview for you is keep an eye on Tillman and Gausman. It's really been rough for the Orioles fans around here to start the season in this fashion. After a couple of years of being very competitive, it certainly feels like it's slipping away here, and I don't think it's going to get any easier with the Indians coming here this weekend. They're your biggest problem. We got the Yankees and the Red Sox to deal with, pal.
Yeah, it's you're going to see a lot of each other over the next couple of weeks between this series and the one next weekend in Baltimore, I guess. So we'll see how it goes.
We'll try to get you better weather when you get here. How about that, all right?
Oh, gosh, I hope so.
Have a crab cake along the way. We won't send you to any of those tourist joints, brother. Take care of yourself, Jay.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Jason Beck joining us here from Detroit. He is the Tigers insider at MLB.com for all things Tigers coverage. You can find him out on Twitter at BeckJason as well. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Listen when you want, where you want, how you want. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. It's there for you. It's a click away. We're also out on Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and emailable anytime. Nasty at WNST.net. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.